Thank you so much, Jenny, for that introduction. And I'll start with the introduction, and then Elizabeth will do hers. As Jenny was saying, my name is Kathia Ibacache, and I am the Romance Languages Librarian at the University of Colorado Boulder.
And hi, I'm Liz Novosel, and I am a liaison librarian for a lot of our technical departments here at CU Boulder.
All right. So before we start, we would like you to talk to us about how do you define authority in the context of a library instruction and information literacy. How do you see authority? What does authority means to you? And what we would like you to do is grab either a sticky note, which is this kind of square over here, and you will open it and add your thoughts, and then click on save, and we'll be able to see what you wrote.
Kathia, did you want to share your screen? Are you demonstrating something? Or
yeah. Oh, my I'm not. Oh, sorry about that. I thought I had already shared and I didn't. Okay, there you go. There you go. Yeah. So I was saying that if you can click on the sticky note, which is this kind of little square on the left side of your screen, you'll click on that sticky note, and then you can write for us your definition of what authority means. Then you click on save, and we'll be able to see your thoughts. So let's take maybe a minute for that. And let us know if you have any issues accessing this platform. Good. I have one. Thank you so much. Thoughts are coming in, and I'm just arranging them to move them. Excellent. So some of the thoughts are an expert in the field, that's what authority is, or a peer-reviewed work, or expertise, so the word expertise is repeating, or when information is peer-reviewed again, so peer-reviewed, expertise. Again, it says expertise and experience, not necessarily through a formal education. Okay, interesting thought. Expertise with an emphasis on many different types of expertises or ways to come by it. Excellent thought. Reputation, another important keyword. Lived experience or training education, important keywords. An author or creator who has measurable experience or expertise in a specific topic. And I will probably evaluate them. Okay, evaluation comes into the conversation as well. Someone who has expertise in the field. So we are seeing these keywords that are repeating, right? Expertise, peer-reviewed, what else do we have? Knowledge, experience, those that might be an expert in their field. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And if you can see in this slide, we added the picture of two people here. One is Albert Einstein, who none of us can refute his expertise in the sciences, right? And then below that, I added the picture of an indigenous leader who just received, I think recently, Elizabeth, you can tell me if I'm wrong, she just received an award for her work on, she's Brazilian, on her work on land. She's working against land appropriation. So she is an activist, an indigenous activist for the Amazons in Brazil. And
her name is Alessandra Correp, by the way.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, you can, if you want, you can add Elizabeth, her name, if anybody wants to Google her. But we chose her because she's an expert on the Amazon, on the lands of the Amazon. She's not an expert from the point of view of academia. but she's an expert in terms of experiential knowledge, right? It's the expert of the knowledge that you are gathered by living in the land, by studying, by knowing the problems that surrounds it. And then she received an award. And we put her here because in this session, we want to evaluate underrepresented voices. So thank you so much for sharing with us all your thoughts about how do we define authority. And before we do that, and Elizabeth is going to guide you through question 2. I wanted to tell you a little bit how this research started. And it was maybe a couple of years ago that I was in a research session for a culture class for the department of French and Italian. And students were doing research papers on a topic of interest that was current. And one of the people were looking for information on France and how France had tried to tackle pollution by creating what's called the 15-minute city. And so Ana Hidalgo, who was she was the mayor, thank you, of Paris. She came up with the idea of the 15-minute city. And then the teacher said, you can find information about the mayor about this idea on social media, on Twitter. And it never occurred to me that I would direct the students to go to social media to find information on this particular politician who came up with the idea that was being used in the city of Paris to work against pollution. So it was a climate activist kind of work, right? And that to me ran the idea with Elizabeth to say, well, maybe we should be looking into our librarians using social media to access these underrepresented voices. And even though she's a famous politician, she's underrepresented in academia, right? She's not writing peer review papers. So what she's saying, her communication comes through government pages or through social media. And anybody who wanted to learn about the city of Paris work with environment was connected. One way of gathering this information was through social media. So that's how our inquiry with social media started. Elizabeth, you want to go now?
Yeah, and we'll talk just a little bit more about our paper in a minute, because this presentation is based on that research. But so with this second slide, the check-in question number 2, can authority be found in social media posts? Maybe a better wording would be, how can authority be found in social media posts, or examples that you have used or that have come up in your librarianship or with students. We just thought this would be kind of a fun question for everyone to respond to and think about all the ways. And people have already mentioned things on the last slide and with the last question about authority, people's experience and things like that. But let's think about like the authority that they have. So personal experience, so eyewitness sort of things. But if you all would be willing to throw some of the sticky notes on here again and just share some of your ideas about how we can find authority. Like if we say in this example from Kathia's class, she was directed to go to Twitter for this mayor's statements and work. So yeah, let's just see what people have. Let's see. My screen's a little bit small, but so recognizing possible biases, searching for a person or event in social media. So trust, but verify. So yeah, people are recognizing that social media has problems, right? As we all know, lots of problems with misinformation or, not a lot of documentation to things. So there's lots of things here. So let's see. Definitely for very current events, it can be useful, especially live tweeting, right? To like show people what's going on in the moment. Search for a person in social media. Lateral searching, yes, that lateral searching is such a great strategy, and to talk about that with students. Kind of off my camera, sorry everyone. And Kathia, can you read a couple of them?
Yeah, there is one here. It says, I follow someone. Let me put it. I follow someone on Twitter who is an expert in the field. So I like to see what they're writing about. I would consider them an expert. Yeah, and in our research, we found that some areas of knowledge, particularly on social sciences, were using social media to advertise their scholarship. So authors go to social media and they post their papers on social media. So their readers can go to social media and find whatever scholarship they have there. So that's an interesting. Governments, posts from government organizations. Yes, that's something that we also realize, that through social media you can gather primary sources. I mean, sometimes government offices are posting in social media some studies or some like government records that are, that can be shared with the public. Those are primary sources. Or if you find, for example, the page of the Library of Congress or the page of the United Nations, all of those organizations are also using social media to communicate with the broader population, right? So any student doing a research paper or trying to find information on that is provided by these organizations, they can go to social media. What else do we have here, Elizabeth?
Grassroots activism. So Black Lives Matter, the Arab Spring, Union Pacific. Yep, so social media posts will have links to sources that have authority. And so maybe that post might mean more established authority. So collegiate sort of things, academic work.
Yeah, and the hashtags, somebody. We also experimented with hashtags and found them so helpful in order to kind of accumulate, like hashtags environment. And then you have all these tweets that are connected to that hashtag. And there is a consensus here among librarians that we must always verify, right? We must always make sure that the information is verifiable and is accurate, and they are who they are. Recognizing possible biases, very important too.
I like this one, that the collection of objects of study, for example, that a student might be studying Taylor Swift's Instagram, and her posts would be examples or exhibit sources. So yeah, it's almost like a primary source resource, but then we've got this complication of all the new AI, right? So that's like a little bit of a twist since we did this research and started thinking about these issues. So we don't have a specific place to address that in this presentation, but we're very open to hearing anyone's thoughts on that too.
Yes.
Should we move on, or do we want to keep looking?
Sure, yeah. I'm still reading through your thoughts because they are so enlightening, right? They are so the point of this presentation, and we really wanted to hear what you were thinking, is because we are also learning with you, right? Where, like, for example, somebody is saying here, when someone is researching local current events, social media may be the only source about a topic. And that reminds me of a conversation I had with a student. That person was saying, I go to social media because social media is the first place to publish a news. So anybody who are interested in current events or news, they go to social media. We're talking about students, so it's undeniable that there is a connection between students and social media. And as librarians, I think it's helpful to be aware of that connection, right? Where are students going for some information? What else is here?
Oh yeah, someone posted what is happening in Florida. And so I'm working on a project right now for supporting trans students. And one of the things we're hoping to do is to provide our community here at CU Boulder with some of those sites that are tracking legislation and changes across the country that are happening right now in many of the state legislatures and things. So yeah, there's a lot, and that can be shared with social media, right?
Yeah. Thank you for that. All right, so we go to our fourth slide. This is just a little bit of background information. Social media as an information source. That's how we started thinking about this topic. And remember, it wasn't because Elizabeth and I were heavy users of social media. On the contrary, it was because these professors were talking about it in classes and it called our attention. That's why we became interested in the topic. And how can it could be utilized as a source of information for a scholarly work. So for academia, for higher education, and specifically for students to gather information about underrepresented voices. And as I was telling you before, underrepresented voices for us are those voices that are not publishing in journals, but they have a voice of authority, or they have knowledge about something and they are sharing that knowledge through a different medium, not academic medium, but a more kind of mainstream medium.
Did you want to briefly summarize our just our work so everyone knows? Because we keep saying, oh, in our research project, but essentially we did a survey of instruction librarians, and we were looking at what kind of social media interaction they had in the library classroom, and we actually found that most of them did not have a lot. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. But we looked at the kinds of platforms they were using and what their purpose was in including it in instruction, because it was new to us. So, but yeah, we have on this slide a few of our takeaways, and while we were doing the research for that paper. And so keep in mind, this was in 2021. So things have changed a little bit since then. It's only been a couple of years, but things have changed. But we found that there was a lot of literature about how students use social media, not maybe enough, but some that did really show they're using it for academic purposes. And we found that really at odds with what we were seeing in library instruction. Now, true, library instruction is just one part of academia, right? But we were just sort of surprised at how extensively students use it for academic work, because we both had a lot of the whole misinformation sort of stuff in our heads, like, social media is not trustworthy, that authority, et cetera. So this whole project was a big learning experience for both of us. But they use it, as we have here on the slide, a lot, not just in their daily life, but in their courses at higher educational institutions, in a lot of different ways. But we also found, as we all know, probably in this room, that especially in the one-shot model, librarians don't have a ton of time, right? And we have to really prioritize, and we have to also sort of cater to what the class, the assignment, the instructor, what they all are expecting from us and what they need from us. So it doesn't always work to include things like social media. So we have that limited time. And so most probably don't include it also for that reason. Also, it's changing constantly, right? And we have this whole new, GTP4 and all the different, every company is coming out with their own large language model or more advanced now. So ChatGPT, I just read that it's obsolete now compared to the others. But we need to know about all those things, because this is where students are getting information, right? So this is going to be a big topic in the coming years, I'm sure, how things are shifting now with that information retrieval. Kathia, did you have anything else to add on this slide?
No. And we added some definitions for you there in case you were interested. These definitions were used in our paper. We define social media as a group of internet-based applications that deal on the ideological and technological foundation of the Web 2.0. And what we took this definition because they also highlighted the creation and exchange of user-generated content. This is people who are creating content that are not necessarily academics, but is really everyone. And that, for us, we consider that part of the definition very important for our paper because we were considering underrepresented voices. And then we decided to frame information source as a primary or secondary source or resource that is used for academic research or assignments in a higher education setting. That was the frame of our paper. All right, so we want to share with you some of our results, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I also just really quickly wanted to thank Amy for sharing the link in the chat of citing tweets, because that's really important too. That's our title, right? Cite the tweet. Not something I've actually been asked about yet, interestingly. But here, I'm having a very strange time with my view. But
yeah, and Amy's saying too, Elizabeth, we have social media options in our APA guide, so students can cite it.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's great. Something that we need to do a lot more thinking about here at CU Boulder, because very few of our colleagues talk about using social media. So that's also sort of interesting on a personal level for us. But okay,
she also said that she said we got asked to cite TikTok too.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, my children are on TikTok more than anything, right? It used to be Facebook, and then it was Instagram, and then it was Snapchat, and now it's TikTok. It seems to be the most popular ones, at least anecdotally from what I've seen. So on this next slide, on slide 7, so we just listed out the platforms that our librarian respondents said that they use the most. So it's interesting to note that 42% said they have not used social media platforms ever really in their instruction. And then down from there, YouTube they used, which made sense to us because using video content made a lot of sense, like to refer students to either things they had made and posted or that others had on YouTube. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. I was even shocked that anyone had used Nextdoor in the library instruction. I thought that was interesting that we didn't get any information from exactly how they use those things. But yeah, so those were the platforms used. So Twitter, which also made sense to us, being the second highest in use because we had seen so many academics using it to share their thoughts, their conference proceedings, their papers, kind of an exchange of intellectual ideas. So that students would use that, and that instructors would want to bring that into a library instruction session made sense to us.
Mm-hmm. And Shona has a comment here. Shona says, yes, we have APA and MLA, and I have been helping cite TikTok for over a year. That's what Shona says. Thank you for that, Shona, and everyone who is commenting.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, our next slide shows the most common ways the respondents in our survey use social media platforms in their instruction. And you can see here that they use it to teach what is available on platforms. That's what they responded. The second most used was lessons on citing and fair use. So the people who were using social media, that's how they were using it. Now, with 44% of our respondents said that they use it to teach evaluation skills. And this is very important because, as you can see, many of us, or many of you, were mentioning in the previous conversations that we had how important it was to evaluate whatever we found in social media, how important it was to assess what we found. So this is important. Social media would be a good place to teach those evaluation skills. If you notice, in yellow, we added the one aspect that was used the least, which was teach lessons on fake news. And we were surprised by that data because we thought if any place could be good to teach students about misinformation or and fake news. It could be social media, but librarians weren't really using social media to teach about fake news or misinformation. So that was a very interesting piece of data. And the next important piece of data was the one with the 36%. That was just a fraction of our respondents use social media to show how to find an authoritative source. We didn't define authoritative source in the paper, so we just said authoritative source, and they mentioned 36% of them says yes, they use it to find an authoritative source, but based on their own definitions of how they define authoritative.
But again, it's not all that surprising given that we saw that people had very little time, and from our own experience, we knew that library instruction is so short typically. I mean, of course, some people have a different experience. They can do semester-long courses or visit a class multiple times, but for many of us, it's just a one-shot instruction session to, tailored in a certain way. So if fake news isn't on the docket, right, it's probably not going to happen. And also authoritative sources just depends on how that could come up. But we were kind of surprised at the low rankings for those. Of course, evaluation skills could have some of that same stuff from fake news in it. So,
and I'm reading the chat. If anybody has any comments with its slides, we can wait a few seconds to see if any of these comments appear so we can comment on them. Any thoughts that you have, we greatly appreciate.
And Kathia, I'm seeing your, maybe it's just the way my monitor is displaying, but your text is so big that I couldn't read it before. And now, now I can only see part of the screen. I was just wondering if other people can see the screen well.
Yeah. Can everyone see the screen well? If does anybody have issues looking at the presentation?
I mean, everyone has their own link to open, so.
Yeah, Sarah says that she can see it well. Thank you, Sarah, for your.
Okay, great. Sorry, it must just be my setting. So
I can see the whole screen. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, because I would hate to be just talking to me that the presentation was not shown.
Exactly. I just want to make sure. Okay, great.
Thank you, everyone. But I did have another comment here that I wanted to share with you. Oh yes, Shona she was sharing her LIT guide. I think was that not my best guide. No worries, Shona. So if everyone wants to go to the chat, they can find Shona's LIT guide that she created. I teach with talk on my LIT guide. So that's excellent, Shona. And I would love, I'm going to open it because I don't want to lose the screen, but I want to save that because I want to go and see that later, Shona. Thank you for that. So we are coming back to our presentation, and then we have a next question for you, Elizabeth.
I just lost it. I was looking at the LIT guide. Okay, so our next question for the group. So again, using the sticky notes for you. So either in your experience or what you can imagine, right? What do you think are the biggest challenges to using social media as an information source in your library instruction sessions? And of course, time is going to be one, and you feel free to include it, but that one's for sure, often an issue.
We have the first comment.
Think about which one will I pick? I'm going to add one too.
And we have the first thoughts here, Elizabeth, if you want to.
Okay. Yeah, I'll stop typing. Okay. So much content everywhere all the time. Yes, I was actually trying to figure out how to say that. Thank you. Beautifully said. Nuance required to properly evaluate social media as compared to other source types. Yeah, right. Exactly. Because we don't have peer review, right? We don't have like these easy things to point at of like, clearly it's this great source. We got to teach lateral reading. We got to look into who's saying it and why, and the background of the institution, the group, the person. Faculty only want scholarly or peer-reviewed articles. That's true. Many faculty do. Although interestingly, we don't report on that in this slide, on our slide deck specifically, but the faculty piece we asked librarians about, And we found that a majority of people found that faculty were very positive about including social media in library sessions. So I found that really interesting. But I think that's true in general. There's like, it's got to be scholarly stuff. Relevancy for some courses, for sure. Social media is used in ways that students prefer, but using it pedagogically is a challenge for both instructors and students. That's right. Evaluation. Yeah, it is a challenge to use it.
Some of them says faculty only want scholarly peer-reviewed articles. And I guess that's a very good common feedback. If that's the case for some of you, the reflection maybe could be, how can we have that conversation with those professors? How can we open the conversation to other, to other sources? Meaning, while it's important to present peer-reviewed scholarship for many topics, obviously, how do we convince professors that it's also important, to hear from other voices? Obviously, it depends of the type of library session that you're offering, right? It depends of the area of knowledge. Because I'm in Romance languages, many of my areas of the courses that I cover deal with culture, with current events. So social media works well, but maybe some of you work with other areas of knowledge in which social media doesn't work well. So that's something that maybe we can bring some reflection of that.
I mean, I love a lot of people's comments here, that students dismiss it as untrustworthy, that you can get into the political weeds with it really easily, that it's profane or bullying. These are all really true and huge challenges. How to include it within the short lecture time, whether it's relevant. The blue, Twitter blue indicating authority, but it can be purchased. Yes, I actually just saw something about that. Someone had written an article about it.
And look at how this is a keyword that I never considered: dress up misinformation. Sorting to the information that looks a lot like real information, dress up misinformation. I never thought about that. Very catchy name for a presentation. If you're thinking on writing a paper, that sounds like a very important keyword: dress up misinformation. And how do I address that? I mean, this is where librarians work as experts on evaluation skills comes into action, right? Our work as librarian and teaching students how to assess information, how to evaluate what we see. It's so relevant when it comes to social media. I think it's really relevant.
So one thing that a couple of these slides are making, or notes are making me think about, is some of our responses in our survey. A couple people here are talking about faculty responses to social media, not seeing it as authoritative or good enough, etc. But I just wanted to point out that, interestingly, a lot of the librarians, what's a lot, right? But a portion of the librarians who responded to our survey used pretty strong language about it being total garbage, and they would never use it, and they would never encourage anyone to use it. So there was just a very, a small percentage were really, really negative, but there was kind of a negative sentiment, again, a couple of years ago, that librarians just had a real resistance to using social media in any way, which, given all of these things that everyone's pointing out, totally makes sense to me. But it's also, if we totally ignore it, right, if we aren't engaging with social media on some level, we're missing out on what our students are looking at and maybe how they're finding their information. And we're out of touch with all of that is a major thing. And it is a way, as we're trying to talk about in this this presentation, to connect with people whose voices are not heard in the scholarly conversations, right? So they don't have an in. They don't have the right education. They live in the wrong area of the world. They are underprivileged. They don't have the money to. There's a million reasons why, especially the global South, is not represented as heavily by far in, more of that canon or scholarly literature that's published, as I'm sure all of you have looked at and know about. but there's so many voices not represented. So it is a way to include those voices, but how to do it is kind of where we get, right?
I have some comments here that I'd like to share. Minich says, sometimes I ask students to talk about experts they find on social media. They mostly refer to Instagram. And then Shona says, and their experts are influencers. Amidite, she says. Thank you for just a TikTok on lateral reading, which I thought was a hoot. Thank you, Shona. So people are sharing in the chat as well. Yes, the social media as garbage in a way, and I'm just that garbage as a keyword, not as a, it's important that we are very conscientious about that, about how social media is also a place for a lot of toxic narratives. So that's one of the challenges of social media, right? So thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate that. Let's go to the next slide. These are the challenges that appear in our paper. And maybe many of them are corresponding with what you thought. Too many things to teach, right? Because our library sessions are so time constrained, right? Technology changes fast was another one. Privacy issues for the students, that was important and an important consideration. Unreliable information, a student lack of accounts, privacy issues for myself. So not only privacy issues for the students, but for the presenter, for the instructor. My technical skills, and students become distracted. So there is a matter of trust, right? That the students go to social media, but instead of following with the activity of the class, they just go and do their own thing and look their own accounts. Those are the issues that appear here. All right, Elizabeth, you want to guide question number 4?
Sure. So thank you all for participating so enthusiastically. We really appreciate it. We had another question for you. So what do you think? So we talked about the challenges, but now let's talk about some of the benefits. We've already mentioned some of them, but I was just wondering, we are wondering if there were other things that you consider or if things you feel really strongly about as being benefits to using social media in information literacy instruction. Let's see. They show evaluating sources for platforms they already use. Yep, shows evaluating sources for platforms they already use. Oh, right, so you can talk about the platforms they're using and help them think about some of those ideas of how do you do the evaluation side of stuff. Direct conversations from experts and authors, quick way to share information in a fast-paced environment, diverse voices or perspectives, can be topical and relevant, so relevant to student lives, right? And so they're going to follow things too, right? And social media leads you to other social media on the same topic, which can be really terrible if you've got a small child watching YouTube, but it can be really great if you're trying to find other researchers or other people involved in a cause or a kind of research or just an event happening. Incorporating marginalized voices. They're already using it, so they should know how to use it well. That could not be said better. I totally agree. That's how I approach Google Scholar as well, even though I think it is a legit good resource as well. They need to use it well. Meet the students where they are, way to teach subject headings and link data. Hashtags are so cool. I totally agree. Students.
Somebody highlighted meeting students where they are, showing information literacy in context where they already have experience. Right, that's a very important. Thank you for highlighting that. Using a platform that they feel familiar and comfortable with. And I see those issues with the classes that I teach. Sometimes it's hard for me to connect with the students if they feel like they're looking, what I'm talking is too unfamiliar to them. So if you're using social media, you're using a platform that is familiar with them. Engagement is facilitated through that familiarity.
I also really like this one. I just put a heart around it. The students will one day not have a database to use. They will need to be ready to use what they have after they leave college. I kind of look at the open access movement and open educational resources similarly, like to teach students to look at all of these sources to find the information they need, because sometimes they can get access to even the scholarly stuff through social media and these other platforms. And hopefully open access will continue to expand, but that's a great point. And one that students often don't realize until it's too late.
Yeah, thank you. And these are the benefits that our participants noted. Students' familiarity, which many of you noted, access to voices not represented in academic voices. They mentioned that, and that was a really excellent data we found. Social media skills are important for everyday life, provides current information, and keeps me up to date with technology. Those are the ones that were received the best percentage points. Now, have you used social media in your instruction? If yes, in what context? And some of you have already shared that in the chat. But if you have used it in any other way, maybe you can share with us here.
Yeah, so Linnea says that, and I'm sorry if we've already read this one, but that she asks students to talk about experts they find on social media. Mostly they're finding stuff on Instagram. So that can be a really helpful way for people to think about, like, kind of networking through social media to find information.
Mm-hmm.
Just a tick.
Look, somebody used Nextdoor. Nextdoor user, please enlighten us. No. I am so curious. I thought somebody had used Nextdoor. Yes. Somebody says, not that much. I compare hashtags to keyword searching. Yes, I think the concept of hashtags, it's so helpful to introduce the keyword of concepts, the concept of keyword and even related terms.
Yeah.
Somebody used it to give examples of misinformation.
Yeah, and using it to talk about that, how it spreads, misinformation spreads.
She says, I'm new in my career, so not yet, but I will definitely be integrating it from here on. Yeah, it's a thought, right? We wanted this session to be a consideration, a thought. It's hard to integrate it because you have so many things to cover, but sometimes it might be helpful. So for those occasions in which you think social media could be a place, we wanted you to explore that. Yes, Elizabeth?
One place that it was just sort of occurring to me is like all the stuff that's gonna come out, right? So people are blogging a lot right now about the whole AI revolution that's been happening in the past year. And so a lot of times that's the fastest way to hear what people are making of this, right? It's faster than we can get it out in an article or anywhere else. So on any topic. So a lot of I work with computer science students, and things that are just going so fast, they can probably track certain scholars and see what they're doing much faster than it'll come out at a conference or whatever. So that's something I haven't thought about, using it for, if I can get into those computer science classes to do some instruction. That is, it's hard. So
Amber says, I use hashtags to explain subject terms. Steve says, in a limited way, showing YouTube videos to support specific concepts. Thank you. And then Jessica says, I create Canvas models to help students with research. I used a TikTok video as an example of where a student might get an idea on a research topic and then go from there. Thank you for all of that. And here in our whiteboard, we have very important information too. They said, talking about info creation and sharing, or it says, I use YouTube in a multimedia research focused workshop. Thank you. I mentioned it briefly when talking about citations. To teach lateral searching, that lateral searching is something that is coming up repeatedly. So thank you for that. I talk about how to find a conversation on the topic on social media, a conversation about it. algorithmic bias and confirmation bias in general. I use both Google and social media, and will be adding artificial intelligence. Thank you for that. Yes, I use it to show our students how to research social happenings. I also use it to discuss how misinformation can spread quickly. I use a TikTok to explain lateral reading. Excellent. We later fact check a TikTok in the same lesson. Very interesting. Thank you. And I see that people are using the pencil feature here. Thank you. That's great. Everyone is having fun with the pencil feature. All right. So here we have another activity for you in these last minutes. We added in these bubbles the name or a handle name of some people that we thought might have authority. They might have authority. And we want you to grab any of these names and go to the internet or the social media and then tell us if you think that the person that you choose has any authority or not. So you can choose Amelia Telford or Hindo Omar or Ana Hidalgo or the Stop AAP I Hate. And then I think the next slide has some questions for you. And you can add your thoughts in the next slide. The question is, what argument could you make for including social media posts from the example you selected in an academic project? Or could a student use the site you look at as an authoritative source in an academic project? Those are just, we give you some points to direct you into thinking, but you can express any thoughts you want in that page.
You can also look up whoever you would want to. You can just look up something on
if you want to share somebody new.
Those were just in case you didn't have something.
So we'll give you a few more minutes.
Jessica was saying that she creates Canvas modules to help students with research and used a TikTok video as an example of where a student might get an idea on a research topic and go from there. Oh, that's really great. I've actually been working with a colleague on sort of a similar thing, not with TikTok, but that's really cool. Showing YouTube videos to support specific concepts, hashtags. So Sarah was saying that she's been on social media a lot, of course, like we all are. And you wanted to cite it, but you didn't feel like you could. I think that's still an issue.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you can gather some thought, I know you're still looking at those persons. Just use the next slide, slide 15, I think it is, where you can put your thoughts about these personalities.
They could put it on 14 too, if you wanted. They could also put it on 14, like if they wanted, don't you think?
Yeah, any place that you want.
Anywhere you would make
that you feel comfortable. Yeah. I'll be moving from 14 to 15 to make sure I'm not missing any of the comments. Okay, and Jenny says we have a couple of minutes left. So let's see if we have any thoughts. Well, we have some thoughts here. Juana Rose, somebody look at Juana Rose. Lived experience on white supremacy, bias, and power structures in the modeling industry. Would also look up her news articles and interviews. All right. We look at letters and diaries for primary source now. There are few primary sources letters now. Social media is where much of that first-hand discussion is happening. Thank you for that. Looking on TT, not finding the individuals. All right. Not finding the individuals. And it's either who can speak for the group. The TT did not find it.
TikTok, I think.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it might be more of a Twitter sort of thing. And some of these are less active now. We tried to get rid of the ones that hadn't posted in a while.
Another Juana Rose, the students could use her as an example of Native American people bringing Native American representation in the fashion world. Yeah, well, World Food Program gives facts and figures about recent global hunger issues. And for politicians, it can be useful to see how they talk about stuff to their constituents. This can be seen often through analysis of their social media presence. Thank you for all the thoughts. And I think we're reaching the end. There is one more here. The World Food Program on Twitter, leading to news articles and press releases, as well as retweeting information related to them. Thank you for all the thoughts. Elizabeth, you wanted refer us to our conclusions as we finish?
Yeah, we were just going to conclude by saying, like we've discussed today, social media has become a big part of academic life for students and for researchers and for faculty. And it can be a way for students to connect to underrepresented voices. And that's still something I think we need to work on as an academic community. It also allows us to participate in global conversations that maybe aren't reaching the academic publishing world. So then we also had a couple more points about teaching librarians needing to engage with each other, kind of like we did today, in discussions about how we do approach it. How can we use it best? What's the most efficient, effective use of it? The citation stuff's great. I need to add this stuff to my LibGuides. And that there's various sources of resistance to including it in the library classroom. And kind of important for us anyway to consider why that is. And it's definitely, there are good reasons to be hesitant about it, right? But there's also good reasons to include it. But yeah, we just wanted to thank you then. We would love it if you wanted to reach out. We're considering doing some more work in the future on this topic. We had a couple of references that are at the end, but yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today.